Okay, so this is my scene for the final project. I'm going to go over the code elements and then I'll come back and point out all the stuff off the checklist for the scene. Okay, so first for the code elements is the pre-made models. It includes a unit box, a pyramid, and a sphere. Oh, I meant to go to the header file. I guess this one works too. Unit box, no, let's just go to the header file. Okay, so here we go. And let me pull up an example to show. And they set the vertex, the normals and the UVs. So pyramid and sphere. Next is the model class. Oh, well, the constructors for the pre-made models are here, I guess. Okay. So for the skybox class, we have a pointer for the texture shader and a pointer for the texture. So in init, when I make the sphere, we have a pointer to the texture shader, a pointer to the texture, and we can decide on the size. And lastly, for the skybox, it needs to show, for render, we set the texture to context, and that's the skybox. Next is the terrain, just similar. For DXF, we have the pointer to the texture of the terrain and a pointer to the shader, the texture light, and the size, and the UV, the UV repeats. Also the value for the max of the height. And lastly, for the terrain, it had to show the average incident face normals. Okay, so that was terrain. I'm just skimming the document real quick to make sure I covered everything. Built to scale, yes, okay. Next part, the shader classes. I mostly used the shader texture in the skybox because I didn't want light. I didn't want the skybox to be affected by light. And I used shader color light and shader texture light. So for shader, or for both the light shaders, I wrote them to have 3 point lights. And other than that, it's not too different from the version we had in class. So in the HLSL version, the light parameters asks for the 3 point lights, and then later you just compute point light 3 times with a different point light data, of course. And let's see, so we had the color base and the texture base of the shader classes. with the multiple light sources, and I'll point out the multiple light sources in the final scene. And lastly, we have to show that it had fog, so here's the fog. And then shaded color light. Oops. Color light texture. And then there's a fog for color light. And before I close this, I just want to show the part where if the user doesn't set fog, then there's no fog. Ah, here it is. So, fog, no fog. Okay. Next is the graphics option. So the ones I've used are, I use them for color light and texture light. And as I build them, they each get a pointer to the shader and a pointer to the model. And if I pull up a header file, I can quickly show the setters. So this is for setting the data. And lastly, when we render, send the data over. Okay, and now I'm skimming the checklist to see, the DX changes. So in initializing the demo, it's mostly loading the data, and then setting the data that doesn't really change in draw. And then over in draw, I send over the data that would change every frame and then call render. Yeah, so lots of stuff there. And now for the scene. Okay, so let's see, we have the skybox, and then I'm going to pan around so we can see that there's no seams, and no seams down there. Okay, and then we have the terrain. Let me go over. So there's a terrain. Now for the scene, my idea was to just like build a little room with toys, posters, and then I left the top to show, because I need there to be a skybox in the scene and I want to be able to see it. I think it looks kind of nice. Okay, so we did the skybox, the terrain, what else? Multiple light sources, so let me move over to an angle where we can look at the light sources. So we've got the directional light. We have the spotlight in the center spinning around. For the multiple lights, I have the 3-point lights in the back, and then I kind of built a little lamp-like thing to show the lights emitting from that. So that's the 3-point lights. for fog, I have the terrain. The terrain turns white, and then I specifically chose this angle because the skybox has a bit of white in this layer as well, and I thought the blending looked pretty nice here for fog, just to contrast. Over here it's not as nice, but there is a layer of fog going across. It just shows better over here. I like how the fog looked there. So there's a fog. Okay. Next we have our one directional light. I think I said that already. The one moving light source, or at least one moving light source, I just have one, is the spotlight. Some of I have these floating letter blocks moving, I guess to make it kind of a playful scene, since we have a room with a bunch of toys, and this is my playful part. And that fits into the theme, I guess. Okay. For the models, we have the cube. So back here is a cube that's not textured. The ABCs, the cube with the repeating textures. And then the cube with the 6-face texture is this Rubik's Cube on the back. The other models, we have the sphere, not textured, and sphere textured. We have the pyramid, not textured, and pyramid textured. This is some like decor, a marble sculpture. Over here, oh, this is just more pyramids. I was just thinking, hey, pyramids can make a tree, so toy tree. And then for the custom models, I have the room, and this room is 3 meshes. We have the posters is a mesh, and the posters, I just connected that mesh with the shelving and the lights. And then for textures, this yellow square is mapped from, I think, these colorings, and the white is mapped from these colorings. And yeah, these are all the same textures. The other meshes are the wall and the floor. So that's one of the custom models. The other one is the dinosaur. It's got 4 parts. So we have the main body, the belly, the eyeball, and the white of the eyeball. I also kind of played around with the graphics objects and used them differently. For example, let me pull up the XAD. Well, this works. Okay, if I go over to, I'm going to close this real quick. I hear my computer working hard. Okay, if I go over to the draw scene, so for the dinosaur graphics to object, I just use it to change the color. So we saw it, there were 4 of them in the scene, and so I changed the color of the body for each one, and I moved it over with the matrix. Pyramid, similar use for the graphics object. For the cube blocks, that one I just gave each of them their own, but I could have also just given each of them, use the same one and use each texture. I thought I did that, but I guess I just did it in my head, but not in the scene. There's one more. Oh, for the marbling texture, let me let this scene back up again. I have a marbled graphics object here. I decided to use it a bit differently, where the graphics object had different models. So this one was textured, same texture, different models, because they changed the model. So I guess if we really wanted to, we can use just two graphics objects, the light and, I mean, the textured and the color shaders. But I think I'd get confused, but it's possible. Okay, so I just skimmed the checklist and I think I covered everything. So that's the end of my video. Thank you.